Hello, and welcome to the fourth virtual information session for the 2025 Edmonton election, hosted by Edmonton Elections. Today, we're going to be talking about the election advertising period. My name is Christy McNeil, and I'm part of the Edmonton Elections team. We are all here to learn more about the election advertising period, but before we get into the presentation, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory and the Métis homeland, and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. Through listening and learning, Edmonton Elections is working to deliver an election for Indigenous peoples and settlers from around the world to continue to be welcomed here and who call Edmonton home. I'm joined today by Eileen Giesbrecht, the returning officer for the 2025 Edmonton election, who will share some important information about election advertising period. Now, before we dive in, I wanted to let everybody know that this presentation will be available on our Edmonton Elections website in the next day or so. There's lots of great information there, including links to past information sessions. So if you haven't yet, please head over to edmonton.ca/elections. Now that's an elections with an S. Eileen, I'm going to pass it over to you to walk us through the topics we're about to cover.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you everyone for joining us online this afternoon. Today we're going to be going over the rules around the election advertising period. So I'm going to start off by providing a quick overview about who Edmonton Elections are, talk about the election advertising period, talk about third-party advertising, including the registration requirements, advertising guidelines, and financial responsibilities. And as always, we're here to take your questions. So if you haven't yet, please submit your questions to elections with an S at edmonton.ca. If we can't get to all of your questions today, a member of our team will get back to you in the next few days. So Edmonton Elections is a growing team within the Office of the City Clerk. We are the non-partisan entity that administers the election for the mayor and 12 councillors' races for the City of Edmonton, the election of 9 trustees for Edmonton Public Schools and 7 trustees for Edmonton Catholic School Division. So now on to why we're all here. We're going to spend the next probably 20 to 25 minutes talking about election advertising. So what is election advertising? So if you think we're about to talk about signs on private or public property, that's not actually what this session is about. There will be a session coming later in the period, so please do stay tuned. But election advertising is actually governed by the provincial government through the Local Authorities Election Act. Election advertising is about promotions or advertising on one or two things. It could be you're advertising for or against one or more candidates, or it could be about an official municipal issue that is the subject to a vote or bylaw or question. This is new for 2025, so if you were a registered TPA in 2021, or if you were inquiring about becoming one from the previous election, I just want to flag for you that there are a lot of new rules for 2025, and we're going to go through those here today. So the election advertising period starts on May 1st and runs all the way to Election Day on October 20th. It does include television or radio ads, so broadcast media. It includes electronic media, things like emails, text messaging, phone calls, social media, and the web. It also includes paid newspaper ads, signs, or posters, or other forms of print media. So that's what election advertising is. I'm going to spend this slide talking about what it isn't. And so election advertising is not editorials or commentaries. It's not candidate debates or speeches, interviews, columns, letters, or even the news. Direct communications by a corporation or a group to its members, employees, or shareholders is also not election advertising. The online sharing of political views, non-commercial in nature, by either an individual, a corporation, or group, is not election advertising. And telephone calls where you're encouraging electors to vote, but not supporting a particular candidate, is not election advertising. And lastly, distribution or promotion of a pre-planned book sold at regular price, according to the legislation, is not election advertising. So for the upcoming election, this election advertising period, as I've already mentioned, runs May 1st until Election Day. It is during this time only that individuals, groups, and corporations can advertise in one or more local jurisdictions. So just to be clear on what a local jurisdiction is, the City of Edmonton, Edmonton Elections runs elections for 3 local jurisdictions. That's the City of Edmonton Municipality, Edmonton Public Schools, and Edmonton Catholic School Division. Those are the 3 local jurisdictions. During this advertising period, third-party advertisers will be able to fundraise, collect campaign contributions, and advertise to promote or oppose a candidate or multiple candidates, or a position on an issue that is subject to a vote, bylaw, or question. So third-party advertisers, as we call them at Edmonton Elections, TPAs, are individuals, groups, or corporations that engage in election advertising during the election advertising period. TPAs are required to register if they spend or receive more than $1,000 within a local jurisdiction. So it's really important to stress here that TPAs are not candidates. They're not parties and they're not slates. They're a separate entity. And they must not be affiliated or collude with candidates, political parties, or slates. So just want to wrap up this slide by confirming who cannot be a TPA. So a corporation that does not carry out business in Alberta can't be a TPA. An individual who doesn't reside in Alberta, or a trade union or employee organization that is not in Alberta cannot be a TPA. All registered charities are prohibited from being TPAs, and there is also an additional list of corporations that are prohibited, and you can find out more about that at the Election Finance and Contributions Disclosure Act. Again, lots of information. The presentation will be on our website, and please have a moment to go and look at that act if you think you might be a prohibited corporation. So that was a lot of very dry information from myself. I'm going to turn it over to Christy, who's going to go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, we're going to spend just a little bit more time on this. This chart here is helpful. It'll help illustrate what a TPA is and what is not. This chart is not comprehensive, and we always encourage individuals to seek legal advice. But here are some of the important distinctions to keep in mind. So a TPA delivers, distributes, or authorizes the delivery or distribution of election advertising during the election advertising period. Again, that's the May 1st to October 20th period. TPA's messages are broadly distributed. So this is things like social media ads, billboards, posters, newspaper ads, and importantly, TPA's advertising promotes or opposes a candidate running in the upcoming election. As Aileen mentioned, it is important to remember that a TPA is not part of a political campaign. You cannot be a candidate, a registered political party or slate, or officially part of a campaign team. Now, you might be asking, how can you register to be a TPA? So this $1,000 threshold is important. If you receive contributions or spend $1,000 in election advertising, or even intend to, you need to register with Edmonton Elections. The registration requirements depend on whether you're an individual, a group, or a corporation. Now, all TPAs must complete Form 27. This form includes all the basics. So this is your name, your website, primary contact information, your chief financial officer, things of that nature. If the third party has a governing body, we will need a copy of the resolution passed by the body authorizing the third party to incur election expenses. There are also additional requirements for groups. So we'll need your membership or principal officer list. So this is a list of principal officers or members, including their full names, their mailing addresses, emails, and phone numbers. We're going to also ask for a resolution to act as a TPA. You can give us the copy of the resolution passed by the group that confirms its intention to act as a TPA. Now, if you're a corporation, you'll need proof of Alberta registration. This may include a certificate of incorporation issued by the registry in Alberta, a corporate registry search, or articles of incorporation. Now, all of these requirements are listed on our website. Please visit edmonton.ca/elections for all the registration details. After you've applied and you've been accepted, your details will be added to the Register of Third-Party Advertisers, which is published on our website. If your registration information changes, you must notify Edmonton Elections within 30 days via email at elections@edmonton.ca.
Thank you for that, Christy. So now that we've gone through the election period and what a TPA is, TPA is, you might now be asking, how much can I spend and how much can somebody contribute? So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about the expense limits. So these expense limits you can find are in the expense limits regulation, which is appended to the Local Authority Election Act. So the Local Authority Election Act and these complementary regulations are the ones that set what the limits can be. And so currently, within the City of Edmonton, the population that's used in 2023 is about 1 million people. The formula that is used has come up with TPAs having a limit of about $500,000 during the advertising period. The advertising expenses need to be paid from the TPA's advertising account. So again, your expense limit during the advertising period is about $500,000. The contribution limit is also legislated, and it is capped at $5,000 for each TPA, whether you're an individual, a corporation, trade union, or employee organization. So Christy and I have talked a lot about the responsibilities on third-party advertisers, but if you're going to be a contributor to a third-party advertiser, you also have some responsibilities. You, one, need to make sure that you're actually eligible to contribute. You need to make sure that you're within your own contribution limit, and most importantly, you must contribute your own funds. So now moving on to some important information about the guidelines for election advertising. So when you're advertising or acting on behalf of a third-party advertiser, you must include the name and contact information. You also must include an indication that the message in favor or opposing a candidate or candidates is in fact authorized by the TPA. Contact information is required by the legislation to ensure that TPAs are publicly accountable for their advertisements. For broadcast or electronic media, the name and contact information must be stated at the beginning of the election advertising. In the case of advertising messages that are transmitted by phone, the TPA's phone number must be displayed on the call display of the parties who've subscribed to it. You cannot block this information. TPA's name must be stated at the beginning of the advertisement. The advertising message also must state whether the third party has authorized it. And lastly, the contact telephone number of the TPA must be stated at the end of the advertisement. So again, this is only an overview and it sounds like a lot of information, but there's great guidelines that have been established by Municipal Affairs, and they can be found either on their website, the links in our presentation, or you can actually go to Edmonton Elections website and you can also get the same information.
Okay, so I'm going to move on next to financial disclosures. If you are spending money as a TPA for the 2025 election, you must provide your financial disclosures on or before March 2nd, 2026. Registered TPAs are required to file a report of advertising contributions as well as a return, including their financial statement, list of contributions received, expense limit report, details of advertisements, and any supporting information. If you are late in your filing, you will be required to pay a late filing fee of $500. TPAs who contravene any of the provisions of the legislation will be liable to a fine up to $10,000 for individuals and up to $100,000 for groups and corporations. TPAs do have a number of responsibilities. TPAs are required to know and comply with all requirements, guidelines, and reporting obligations. We always encourage people to refer to the Local Authorities Elections Act to review the full extent of their legislated obligations, and please seek your own legal advice. But here, we just wanted to stress a few responsibilities for you. TPAs are not allowed to transmit election advertising at voting stations. So this means no advertising at voting stations either on advanced voting opportunities or on election day. TPAs cannot accept or spend contributions that they should know are being made by an ineligible contributor or will cause the contributor to exceed their limit. TPAs must maintain an election advertising account and issue receipts for every contribution accepted. TPAs can't incur expenses that exceed the expense limits. So as I mentioned earlier, contravening the provisions of the legislation will lead to a fine of up to $10,000 for individuals and up to $100,000 for groups and corporations. Lastly, we wanted to touch on the complaint process. Edmonton Elections is responsible for administering the election. We are not an investigative body. If you have concerns regarding potential violations of the Local Authorities Election Act as it relates to third-party advertisers, you can submit them to the election commissioner. Alberta's election commissioner is responsible for investigating all complaints related to third-party advertising. If Edmonton Elections receives complaints or allegations about the activities of a TPA or non-compliance, we will refer them to the elections commissioner. Okay, great. So we've covered a lot of ground here, Aileen. I think it's a good time we pause and we move over to our questions. Just as a reminder, you can always email any outstanding questions to elections@edmonton.ca. And so if we don't get to them today, we're going to respond to you in the coming days, so don't worry. So we have some questions here about opposing candidates. As a TPA, can I oppose more than one candidate? And how much can I spend on advertisements for each candidate?
So great question, Christy, thank you. So a TPA is permitted in the legislation to support or oppose one or multiple candidates within a local jurisdiction. So the first thing you need to make sure is that you're actually registered within that local jurisdiction. So Edmonton Elections is running elections for 3 jurisdictions, and the form allows you to indicate which jurisdiction you want to have election advertising. So first of all, make sure that you're registered, and then yes, you're able to oppose or support more than one candidate. However, the total advertising expenses for the TPA within the election advertising period is set in legislation, and it's about $550,000 for each jurisdiction that you're registered in, regardless of the number of candidates that you're involved in either supporting or opposing their election. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great. So that $500,000 mark is pretty important to keep in mind. Now, I have some questions about registering. So do I have to register separately if I want to advertise in both the municipal and the school board elections?
So just to reframe that question, I think they're asking if you want to advertise in all 3 local jurisdictions. The answer is yes. So the city and each school board are separate local jurisdictions under the election legislation, and so TPAs are required to register for each local jurisdiction that they want to advertise in. So we do have a registration form available on our website. It's a single form, but you do again have to indicate which local jurisdictions you're going to be advertising in. So again, look at the form, make sure you're registered, and then do all of that before you start collecting contributions and advertising, the period starts May 1st.
Okay, great. So let's move on to what's considered election advertising. We have a question about paid posts by social media influencers. Is this considered election advertising?
Really good question there. So social media that might be going on right now about election candidates is not considered election advertising. So again, the key in the question there was paid posts. So if there are paid posts, the TPA that is paying the social media influencer is responsible for making sure that they're registered. And then again, in the presentation, we talked about all of the guidelines for electronic advertising, such as identifying who the TPA is, the contact information, and that they've in fact endorsed the message that's being communicated. So in short answer, paid posts by social media influencers is considered election advertising, and there's lots of requirements to follow.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I want to move to maybe one more question here about our register. So what information about third-party advertisers is published to the Register of Third Parties?
Another really good question there. So again, just a friendly reminder that right now on Edmonton Elections website, we've got 3 different registers. So you can find a list of those candidates that have filed their intention to run. You also are going to find a list of those that have filed their nomination papers. You're also going to find a list of local political parties that have registered with Edmonton Elections. And the 4th register that you just highlighted there is about Register of Third-Party Advertisers. So if there's any third parties that registered in 2021 that are still active and they haven't canceled their registration, they're going to be on the list. Any new applications that come in and are accepted are going to be added to the TPA register, and it's going to include a lot of very detailed information. It's going to include their name, the contact of their primary member, the name of their chief financial officer, the phone number of the primary contact, the website, the jurisdiction of registration, and again, for Edmonton Elections, there's 3 local jurisdictions you can choose from, the date that their registration was accepted by Edmonton Elections, and lastly, it's also going to have their advertising contribution statement. So a lot of transparency will be applied to TPAs once we've accepted their registration. So again, lots of information, Christy, so please encouraging everybody to go to our website and to send your questions in via email.
Yeah, and just further to that, Aileen, how long will that information be staying on the website and the register?
Oh, good. So the register is set up indefinitely. So once you register as a TPA, it stays up there until you complete the process to have that be canceled. So again, extra transparency when it comes to third-party advertisers.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for answering those questions. I think that wraps us up for today. Just as a reminder, this presentation will be available at Edmonton Elections website in the next day or so. There's also multiple ways to stay connected with us. Please follow us on X at EDM Elections. Regularly check edmonton.ca/elections. You can email your questions to elections@edmonton.ca, and you can sign up for our e-newsletter for regular updates. Again, please visit edmonton.ca/elections and you'll see the link there to subscribe. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Aileen, for providing us with this great overview. There's going to be more public virtual information sessions covering various topics in the coming months. Please stay tuned for more details and take care.